For more than 1,000 years, roughly, from the Han and Roman worlds through the late medieval dynasties, caravans stitched Asia together in a slow, steady thread. Not a single silk road, but many routes braided across deserts and highlands. Thousands of handlers, scribes, packers, and merchants moved cloth, paper, tea, glassware, wool, and spice the way rivers move silt, patiently, season by season. Inns called caravanserais stood a day's walk apart, offering water, fodder, shade, and a ledger. Here, people traded not only goods, but weights, words, and news. With simple tools, scales, seals, ropes, awls, and shared habits of trust, they kept long distances manageable and turned faraway places into neighbors. Quick thing before we start: if these calm journeys keep you company at night, tap like or subscribe so you can find them again. I also love seeing the map light up. Leave a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. Some of you are settling into midnight in Buenos Aires, while others are making tea at dawn in Manila. Now, get comfortable. Fix your pillows. Settle your blanket. Let your jaw soften and your shoulders drop. We're only going as fast as a caravan walks. You wake before the sky decides on a color. The courtyard is still, a large rectangle of stone holding the last of the night's cool. A sleepy camel works its jaw. Leather creaks where a halter rubs. Somewhere a kettle begins to murmur over coals. Your palm slides across a saddle blanket, dense wool, faint lanolin. The air smells of damp ash, cardamom bread, and the bright clean note of polished brass. You sit up, bind your hair, wrap your scarf, and rinse your mouth with a sip of yesterday's river, carried in a goatskin that remembers the shore. First, you take stock. The waxed ledger opens with a soft crackle. A steel-yard beam rests across your knees. You weigh a roll of silk, the fabric cool and obedient, then set clay weights along the arm until the pointer steadies. You press your seal into a margin of wax, a small pomegranate impressed cleanly. Bells clink as a handler leads a string of camels toward the gate. Their padded feet kiss the stone. Whisk, whisk, almost soundless. A small hitch. The beam drifts a hair to the right, as if carrying a memory of yesterday's load. You test it with a coin you know by heart. Not quite true. You fold a slip of linen beneath the fulcrum and test again. The pointer settles where it should, neither favor nor meanness in the measure. Portable steel-yard scales traveled with traders for centuries. Reputation often weighed exactly what the beam did. The houseboy arrives with tea and flatbread. The tray is wood scrubbed pale by salt and steam. Mint rises gently from the cups. Steam fogs your knuckles. Glaze on the bowls shows a delicate crackle. The bread's crust carries a quiet sweetness from the hearth. You pour for the boy first, then for yourself. He glances at your seals and the folded gate token. In a soft mood today, he whispers about the guard captain. If you line up before the sun touches the arch, you'll be out early. You slide a coin under the tray. He pretends not to see. Hospitality first, prices second, an old road habit that keeps bargains from tasting rushed. Harnessing begins in the gray hour. You sort loads with the small satisfaction of neat work. Silk above spice, spice above ceramic. Nothing sharp is allowed to bruise cloth. You pad corners with felt, bind long parcels with palm fiber rope, and nestle wrapped jars where bodies are warmest. A crate exhales cinnamon. The dust sits on your tongue like a polite story. A meal stamps. The iron ring at its ankle taps stone, light as a spoon. When you tap a camel's shoulder, it folds to kneel. Its breath is a steady bellows in the dim. A strap resists night chill, made the leather stiff. You warm it between your palms, hold it near the brazier, and work a thumb of oil into the grain. The buckle slides through with a small, consenting click. Your hand smooths the whirl in the camel's neck hair. It blinks, chews, and blinks again. You move down the line, testing knots, balancing the sway. Left pack, right pack no more than a finger's width between them. A squeaking strap receives a sliver of reed to quiet it. Little attentions keep large repairs from asking for a whole afternoon. The gate stirs at last. A chain lifts with the slowness of sleep leaving bone. The arch frames a pale band of sky. You guide the first string forward, bells low at their throats, stitched with red thread. Breath steams into curls and disappears. A small obstacle waits there. The tax scribe is late. His stool sits empty, inkstone cold. Without his mark, the token is only a kind suggestion. You stand without pressing. Others gather potters, drovers, a shepherd carrying offensive reeds. Timed as that caravan thing stretches thin, then settles quietly like cooling lacquer. When he arrives, apology in his posture, you return a bow. He waits the stone. Ink blooms slow as tide. The brush writes the day's number in a hand that is crisp and kind. He stamps your token wet black turning matte, and you pass a modest pouch of salt. No bargaining, just a courtesy with flavor. His eyes brighten. Salt travels differently than silver. Outside the wall, the air is wider. The road begins not as a single line, but as many choices braided into one. Wheel ruts nest inside older ruts. Hoof prints hold last week's rain. Small pale flowers spot the margins where a ditch stayed generous. You raise your scarf against a wind that is not unfriendly, only curious. Dust lifts and settles. A dry mineral note sits in your mouth. The light has that clear, rinsed quality roads like to wear at morning. You check your face cloth, dampening it lightly from a small skin so it lies comfortably. The camels take to the rhythm the first steps taller, then lower as the path reminds their legs of the old measure. Bells answer one another. The line becomes a sentence the day will read slowly. A young camel sidles away from the shadow of a high bale. You shorten the lid by a hand's length and swing the bale's edge inward so its shade falls elsewhere. You walk with the animal a dozen paces until the discomfort loosens its hold. The handler raises an eyebrow. You nod small victory shared. You count quietly to keep the pace gentle and regular. 100 steps, look back. 100 steps, check a knot. 100 steps, a sip of water and a lick of salt. The sun unrolls itself rather than rises. When it clears the ridge, it writes silver on the soft edges of ears and shows flower-pale dust on your cuffs. On the right, irrigated rows lie straight and modest. A canal carries a quiet gleam. Cotton heads nod on their stems. A girl in a lapis-dyed robe waves with exactly 2 fingers. You match her economy. A wooden dipper taps a pitcher as a woman draws water and spills a little on purpose to sweeten the dust. The dark wet patch is a small invitation to ankles passing by. Many long routes touch the ribs of farms and orchards. A day's kindness could be a handful of water or shade shared without a word. Mid-morning, when the sun sits a spear length above your outstretched hand, you call a halt. Gravel under hooves prevents digging. 4 shallow dishes, 2 for water, 2 for a mash of grain and dates. The animals lean in without quarrel. You sit on a folded cloak and brew tea, again short, steep, low flame. Leaves rise and fall once steam carries a green hedge. Cup glaze warms your fingers. The world narrows to the kind of quiet that stays. A fellow traveler asks to tie his string to yours, just until the wind changes. You weigh it. Shared steadiness is kind. Tangled duties can be noisy. You offer another path walk together without tying. Exchange rope if a strap fails. Share a waterskin if one runs low. He bows. The day stays spacious. When you rise, a corner strap has slipped to a chafe-prone angle. You ease the load down, replane its face with a folded mat, and bind again. Tug-tug listening for the right sound. An even low creak that promises no mischief. The handler gives you that small, Sideways smile, working people save for other working people. This is a language both of you speak without nouns. The track lifts toward a gentle ridge, stubbled with low shrubs shaped by wind. The light thins a little in the high air. You read the ground. Old wheel scars smoother here, witness to many careful crossing stones, lying flat as if they, too, have learned to rest. Far off, a darker square marks a grove. An animal path veers there. You stay with the main line, where the day's caution and other people's caution have already agreed. You adjust the rhythm-longer breath on the uphill, slower counting. Bells space themselves like beads on a cord. Your ledger rests against your side, warm through the cloth. Inside, figures keep their own quiet order. The road is teaching you to think in columns that feel like distances. The wind at the crown greets you without hurry. It finds your scarf, tastes the dust, and moves on. You pause at a marker stone tipped with a notch, just a reminder that others have stood here and turned the next page of the day. You touch the stone with 2 fingers, the way your teacher once did before crossing a pass. No magic, just a habit that turns a climb into a paragraph that ends neatly. You check straps one more time, smooth a stubborn twist with the heel of your hand, and breathe out. The descent is kind, a long, steady line toward a band of tamarisk and the suggestion of water beyond. Afternoon will carry you there, to shade and the sound of small birds writing the margin notes of the route. For now, keep your pace easy, your jaw unclenched, your eyes soft on the track. And we'll follow the road down together in the next chapter, where the wind-polished pass gives way to a ribbon of green and the day learns a gentler color. The wind at the crown greets you without hurry. It tastes of cool stone and distance. You touch the marker's notch with 2 fingers, an old habit that turns a climb into a sentence with a tidy period, and begin the descent. Step, test, step. Gravel shifts politely and then holds. Bells answer one another at an easy interval, a soft necklace of sound. Sunlight widens across the slope and lays a warm palm on your scarf. The air carries 3 notes at once: dry thyme crushed under sandal, the faint salt of old dust, and a sweetness drifting up from somewhere you cannot see, yet tamarisk, likely, riding its quiet line along water. You pause to set the caravan's pace for downhill. A long breath, a low word. The first camel lowers its head and shortens its stride. The rest agree without discussion. A strap murmurs a small leather complaint. You slip a folded felt pad under the corner of a long parcel, snug it with a palm fiber wrap, and bind until the sound becomes an even, low creak. Little adjustments now become comfort later. Many routes appointed pace leaders, handlers who set the walking rhythm and preserved animals for months, not days. The job was part metronome, part kindness. A cross breeze slides along the ridge and tries to make a kite of your outer cloth. You gather the trailing edge and roll it twice, pinning it with a simple bone toggle. Sand lifts and passes. It speaks the old language of grains, learning to travel politely. You drink once one sip, one breath, and then share the skin, a practiced tilt that gives measure without counting. The slope relents. Ahead, the ridge opens like a curtain and shows the valley's ribbon of green. Tamarisk tufted in pale pink, small palms, a run of reeds where the water hums out of sight. Your animals lift their noses and read the page with you. The bells space themselves farther apart. Even your thoughts take a slower seat. A minor snag. From the second string, the protective netting over a ceramic jar loosens. It's not remembering someone else's hand. You kneel, set your palm against the jar's cool belly, and test for movement. A faint rattle answers, enough to worry a neck on bad ground. You unlace the net, slide a reed mat between jar and crate, and plane the tilt by the width of a fingernail. A new binding with a clove hitch. A final tug. Quiet again. Fragile goods traveled wrapped in woven sleeves, nested in felt or straw. A jar that arrived whole was not luck. It was 100 small mid-journey corrections. Nearer the green, the air remembers water with every breath. You hear it before you see it, a low, even thread under birdsong and bell. The ground darkens by a shade you can feel through your sandal. The road narrows to pass between two sun-warmed stones, painted with a finger of lime someone's way of telling animals to mind their loads. You lift your hand to your brow and let your eyes soften. This is not a marketplace. It is a shared well edged with shade, and access has its own soft rules. The first trough sits beneath a tamarisk with a trunk like braided rope. The wood of its lip has been rubbed to a satin by years of muzzles. You guide your line to a waiting place and tie a loose loop picket enough to keep order, slack enough to let knees bend. Other travelers are already watering, a shepherd with 2 ewes, a potter leading a donkey whose baskets smell faintly of wet clay, a rider leader, an extra horse with a saddle wrapped tight in oiled cloth. A small etiquette puzzle arrives, as if it had been walking beside you all morning. A latecomer tries to cut in, not from greed, simply from habit, learned on a different gait. His camel nudges forward, just enough to turn 2 lines into a braid that will snag. You catch his eye, tap your chest, hold up 2 fingers, then show your hand open your turn, then his. You add the soft road gesture that means share the shade, and shift your animals so the first palms cover both groups. He bows, embarrassed, and falls back half a length. No harsh words. The road prefers solutions you can fold and reuse. You fill 2 shallow pans and set them down on the gravel first, the younger animals, then the rest, so the impatient energy goes quiet before it spreads. You ladle water with a gourd worn thin at the edge, and the hollow sound settles your own breath. When your turn at the trough comes, you guide each muzzle with the back of your hand, so wood and tooth never learn to know one another. Slow pour, long swallow. The throat works in grateful ripples. At many oases, a water steward, Mirab, kept order by day. Where none stood, travelers enforced their own cues with quiet gestures. Kindness saved time more reliably than force. You kneel at the edge of the run and wash dust from your wrists, then from the pulse points in your throat. It cools you from the inside out. You dampen your face cloth again, bind it loosely so air can pass, and return to the line. The light has turned a honey color against the reeds. They whisper as if counting. You make a small meal, nothing more than you need. A handful of cracked wheat softened in warm water, a pinch of salt, 2 dates pressed flat with a thumb. You brew tea on a low flame. It rises once, falls, then waits. Steam curls into your scarf and comes back mint-sweet. You tear the bread from morning with the care you would give a map. Crumbs in your palm. Crumbs in the shade for the little birds that hop like punctuation marks near your sandal. A merchant you have seen at 2 other stops sits at the far end of the shade. He carries his samples in a book of narrow pocket-style cakes, thread lengths, small squares of cloth. He lifts a square the color of green almonds and tips his head in question. You shake yours with a smile. Your bales have their own story today. He presses his book closed with that small, affectionate gesture artisans share with their tools. Many traders kept sample books, swatches, twists of silk, cakes of pigment to pre-sell by color and texture before exposing full bales to dust and eyes. Time becomes padded here. It walks barefoot. You use the gentler minutes for care. You pick clay beads from a hoof, examine knees for heat, run oil into a callus with the heel of your hand. On the 3rd string, a camel prefers the ground, content to make a small hill of its folded legs. You kneel beside its neck, speak its working name, rub the joint that takes most of its day. Warm water and patience loosen the hinge, and when you lean your shoulder in and say, "Rise," it does. You lighten that animal as next load by a shallow bowl's worth, and share the difference to the younger one it was already restless to carry more. Everyone breathes easier. A pottery jar one you do not own slips and taps a stone. The sound is soft, but not friendly. A hairline crack blooms from lip to shoulder, a thin, pale vein. The owner looks down, then up at you, helpless. You touch the crack with a fingertip, then press your thumb into a small cake of pine pitch in your kit. Warm it between your palms until it glosses like honey, line the seam, and bind over with a strip of cloth torn on the line. Press. Hold. Allow it to take set in shade. The potter's thanks is the quiet kind. He offers a thumb of pigment on paper, a red like evening apricots. You decline with a palm over heart. He insists. You accept. The road likes generous circles. The steward arrives if steward he is no badge, only the posture of someone used to water and to people. He skims silt from the trough with a flat board and a practiced flick. You offer a fist of salt for his pouch. He does not count it, only weighs it in his palm and nods. The exchange means more than it costs. There is talk in the shade, not busy, just enough to keep company. News walks faster than any of you. A scribe says the gate 2 days ahead now marks tokens on blue paper, not brown. The ink shines longer, so be careful not to stack them. A drover mentions a bridge plank shifted during last week's rain. Lead your first camel wide at the 3rd span. An herbal seller names a plant that eases lungs when dust is stubborn. You write 3 notes in the narrow place at the back of your ledger. Blue tokens dry separate. 3rd span wide. Lung tea time. Quince peel. The script feels good under your hand, the way a strap feels when it sits flat. You nap nothing, and yet rest accumulates around your shoulders like a shawl. The animals fold and rise, and the shade moves like a slow boat across the courtyard of sand. When the sun lowers to a place you can cup with your hand, you begin to make the caravan small again. Bowls wiped, flame pinched, ash buried. Loads covered with suncloths that now become evening cloaks. Ropes coiled to the same diameter, so your hands find the habits they expect. A young handler from the other group comes with a question folded carefully, so it doesn't look like a burden. Would you carry a letter to the next station? He shows you the note, tied with blue thread. The seal pressed with a stamp you half recognize. He has no coin to send with it. That is not the part that matters. You tuck the letter into your ledger as inner flap and show him where it sits, a promise both of you can point at. He bows hand to heart, lips, brow. You answer in the road's shorthand, a palm lifted just enough to say yes. Caravans doubled as mail. Documents traveled tucked in ledgers. In saddle pockets, under seals impressed with simple household marks, pomegranates, palms, cups, stars. You check the sky's color against the palm's shadows. There is time to reach the canal path before full evening, and perhaps a small market where a woman sells thin yogurt in clay cups with a sprig of mint pressed against the side. You think about the taste cool, a little sour. The glaze rough under the thumb, and the thought alone cools your face. You walk the line once more. Fingers brush each load the way a baker brushes flour from loaves. You feel for heat, for drag, for that small, uncooperative angle that grows into a complaint at dusk. You find one barely there, and slide a folded scrap of cloth underneath. Done. The first camel lifts its head and chews a slower syllable. Everyone is ready. You stand and look back at the trough and its tamarisk. The water is lower by a patient measure. A bird drinks from the hollow where your bowl dripped. It hops twice, satisfied. The steward has set his board to dry against a stone. The potter's jar mended sits out of sun to cool its new seam. Nothing in this place will remember your names long, but it will remember the way you left it quiet, orderly, as if you meant to pass again and wished the pattern to be waiting. You step onto the track. Dust lifts, then settles, the day's last light folding neatly into your scarf and into the bells. Breath in, breath out. The caravan lengthens itself into evening. Ahead, the canal path gleams in places where clay shows through the silt, and the reeds make a soft sound like turning pages. We'll follow that sound to the low hill with its small market and lamplight, where ladles tap bowls and voices fall to a murmur fit for night. The canal path gleams here and there, where clay shows through the silt. Reeds brush your calves with a sound like turning pages. Evening gathers without hurry. It simply folds itself into the low places and waits. You guide the line toward a rise no taller than a roof, and the market appears by degrees. First the smoke, then the lamps. Then the measured bustle of people who have learned how to end a day without spilling it. You slow the bells. A palm of your hand, a word that has no edge. The first camel shortens its stride, and the others fall into the same decision. A boy jogs out with a wand of split reed to show you the place for animals, a bare rectangle tamped hard by hooves, bordered by a shallow ditch that keeps straw from wandering. He points to a sign. Water first, feed after, no flames near the tether line. You nod, and he brightens as if he had written the rules himself. Sound, texture, smell. A ladle taps a clay rim. Coarse hemp brushes your wrist as you pass a rope maker. Yogurt cools the air with a fine, sour sweetness. Lamps hang low from a bean saucer-shaped, each carrying a patient mouth of flame. Someone tunes a two-string fiddle, just a few notes, then rests the bow as if it too should eat before it works. You cue at the waterboards. A steward bare feet, quiet eyes, dips, and pours with the balance of a mason. A small obstacle waits neatly for you. The measure is not your measure. His trough board is cut to a local span longer than your folded forearm, shorter than the one you use along the North Road. He gives each line 2 boards by custom. Your younger camels will ask for 3. You try not to make a request sound like an argument. 2 fingers, a pause. Then a third raised, held halfway, the road sign for little more sane price. He weighs your face like a scale, then tips the board with a faint smile, half a board extra rather than a whole. The animals lean in and drink as if the day had been held back just for this moment. You pour from your gourd into shallow pans for the colts, letting their impatience settle its shoulders. Measures shifted from town to town hands, spans, the length of a board, the weight of a stone. Most markets kept a city standard locked in a chest. Merchants carried their own small nests of weights to negotiate the distance between customs. You turn to feed. Fodder is sold as rope-tied sheaves from a cart whose boards carry a colonnade of old knife cuts. The seller counts by touch, not by eye. His thumb lingers on the knot, reads the tightness, then nods. You pay in coin, but he lacks change fine enough for your silver. You do not want your evening to become an arithmetic lesson. A tiny puzzle, then, with a gentle answer. You add a pouch of salt to make his sum right. He accepts salt as if it were a greeting. Across the routes, money wore many faces: bronze cash, clipped silver, stamped discs, raw ingots, even shells. Salt, tea bricks, and cloth often bridged small gaps where coins stumbled. You loosen girths, backs breathe. You rub a thumb of oil into a spot where a strap rubbed a high rib, then tuck felt under the offending corner. A camel's lip trembles in a way that means relief. You scratch the whorl under its ear, the place where a scratch is a conversation. On the second string, a jar wrapped in reed creaks when weight shifts. You slide a palm between jar and crate, feel a tiny moving thought under your hand. A folded scrap of cloth fixes its grammar. The creak quiets. The market itself hums like a good oven-low, steady, warm. Vendors sit on mats stitched with the patience of winters. A girl sells cucumbers shaved thin into a shallow bowl, mint pressed on top like a small green fan. You buy yogurt in a cup so soft at the rim it feels like an old spoon. Clay cools your lip. The mint lifts and clears. The sour is kind rather than sharp. You share a hinge of bread with the handler, who helped you at noon, and tuck another into your belt for late hours. You check your list short, sensible. Palm fiber rope, 2 cakes of pitch, a skein of waxed thread, a felt patch no bigger than your palm. The rope seller weighs his coils on a rock with a groove worn by rope itself. He offers 3 qualities with a fingertip, this for tying, this for binding, this for repairing only if you must. You choose the middle. Good is often the same price as regret once you're a day away. A small etiquette knot appears. The old woman at the pitch stall has 2 customers and 1 scale. The younger man presses forward with his coin, speaking as his hand moves. You stand with your coin a little to one side and wait for her eyes. When they find you, you touch your brow and keep your hand open. After him, not after his hurry. She measures your cake as if it were a minute of her own, and wraps it in a leaf impressed with a pattern of ribs. You thank her for the leaf. She smiles as if you had noticed her handwriting. Keeping the queue without looking at it was a quiet art in busy markets. Hands, not feet, did most of the talking. The oldest person present often set the order with nothing but a glance. The money changer sits cross-legged on a low plank. Tray divided into little squares, silver here, copper there, weights nested like song verses. You exchange a broad coin rubbed thin by other people's hunger for a handful of smaller ones that will pay for nails, not only news. He tests each with a flicked nail against tooth. You weigh his weights with your eye, rather than your argument. He slips 2 dull coins aside before you need to speak. Trust that begins small can afford to grow. You walk your line again before dusk turns into its deeper version. Bells are muffled, so they will not argue with sleep. Knee cords are checked, but not tightened. You rub a little fat into a dry spot on a lead rope and tie your own knot there, a mark you recognize in the dark. The animals have settled into the geometry of rest. Folded legs, a long sigh, a jaw that slows until it is the slowest thing you can hear. There is a post house near the well, its door no bigger than a saddle blanket, its clerk working by lamp. You take the blue thread letter from your ledger and show it resting under your palm. The clerk dips a brush into ink, marks his book with 3 characters and a small square origin. Bearer, destination, and presses a reed tag into your hand to prove the exchange lived. He tucks the letter into a deep pocket in the wall, tile cool against paper. Way stations moved more than bodies. Notes, accounts, and small parcels traveled under many roofs by relay tags and stamps, creating a thread of custody long before sealed bags and stamped couriers took over. Back outside, the air has learned to be dark. Lamps hang from a string and make their own constellation. Voices loosen. They are rounder now, less crowded. You find a corner beneath a beam and set up your little repair kit as if it were a table. Wax thread slides through cloth like a patient river. You bind a strap's edge so it will think twice before trying to fray. You plane a splinter from a crate lip with a knife that knows this kind of wood. The shadings smell faintly of resin and something almost citrus. Wind checks the market once, the way an elder knocks lightly before entering. You answer it by straightening a cloth over a bale and laying a stone on a corner. A lamp guttering near the rope stall is pinched and reseated. One woman lifts her jars into the lee of a low wall. A boy brings an extra handful of pebbles to weight his mat's corners. The gust passes. No one names it. The evening returns to its chosen height. You eat a second, smaller yogurt because it is the right thing to do near a canal. The vendor folds a mint sprig into the curve of the cup and tells you without words to keep the spoon. The spoon is nothing, and it is a keepsake of this exact light. You wash it at the trough, let water carry away a little green, then dry it on your scarf's edge. There is music now. The 2-string fiddle remembers a tune that has almost no beginning and therefore no need of an end. A frame drum enters and does very little, which is exactly the right amount. A young scribe on a low stool writes a letter for a man who speaks in a careful hush. The scribe pauses sometimes to blow the ink cool. The man watches this, then watches his own hands, then watches the lamp's moths with a look that thanks them for staying near. You add 3 lines to your ledger. They are not numbers. The first is the smell of mint in clay. The second is 3rd span wide, twice underlined. The third is a new word for a kind of rope twist you had thought had no name. You press your seal next to the lines without quite meaning to. The little pomegranate nods, as if to say that not all entries measure weight. The night pen is watched by 2 boys who take turns. One walks the line with a stick to lift a sleeping rope away from a foot. The other counts quietly when he passes each knot. You give them dates and the dry heel of your bread, and they sit straighter as if the gifts included instructions. You tuck your own sandals under the rolled blanket, so no stranger's foot can try them on and find they fit. You settle. A cloak becomes a pillow. A second cloak becomes the idea of a wall. Your shoulder blades find the ground's slow story, and the ground listens back. The canal's breath is a long, level line. A moth touches your sleeve and mistakes it for a lamp. You redirect it with the gentlest of drafts. You think of the wide places you have crossed, and the ones ahead salt flats that behave like mirrors. Gravel fans that slide if you stamp, scrub that keeps its green under its own shadow and will share it, if you ask with your body rather than your knife. You picture tomorrow's first hour, ropes in your hands with the night's cool still inside them. A gatekeeper's drowsy nod, the first bell, then the second, then the day. Many caravans preferred pre-dawn starts, cool air, quiet minds, animals willing arriving at the next shade before heat decided to argue. The road rewards schedules that listen as much as they plan. You close the ledger as gently as you would fold a sleeve. Ink dries to a soft mat. The lamp near your corner has learned to burn without being watched. You draw your scarf over your mouth, not tight, just enough to let your breath find itself again. Animals sigh. Someone coughs once, and then forgets why. Above the string of lamps the sky opens black with a blue you only see when day is remembering its manners. If you raise a finger, you can bracket a handful of stars and pretend they're a guide no one else knows. You don't need a secret compass tonight. The canal keeps its own straight counsel, and the road tomorrow will accept it. Let your jaw soften, let your hands be heavy. Let the bells that are not ringing yet ring anyway, in the place where you count your steps. We'll meet the first of those steps before sunrise. When the market is only ash and footprints, and the road points toward a dry plain, it keeps the cool a few quiet hours longer. You wake in a quiet hour when lamps are only memory. Ash wears a faint blush where embers wait. The canal exhales a slow, level breath. Leather cools against your wrist. You sit up without haste and fold the night away, cloak to pillow, pillow to roll, roll to strap. Your hands remember each knot the way a reader remembers favorite lines. A moth that mistook your sleeve for a lamp finds the sky again and leaves no complaint behind. You move through the tethered lines as if you were in a library. Low voice, light steps, respect for bindings. Hooves shift. A knee clicks softly. A bell gives one careful syllable, and then thinks better of it. The air carries 3 notes at once. Coal that forgot to be fire, damp reed, a thread of mint from last night's cups. You dampen your face cloth, tie it loose, and let your breath lengthen. No hurry. The road is awake, but it is not impatient. A strap resists your hand stiff from the cool. You warm it between your palms, then work a thumb of fat into the grain and press the buckle home. A reed splinter sits where it should not along a crate lip. You plane it with the knife's quiet shoulder until the wood answers smoothly to your touch. Little repairs in the dark save the larger kinds in daylight. Caravans often set out before dawn to borrow the day's best hours. Fewer voices, cooler air, animals' patient arrival at shade before heat learns your name. You thank the night boys at the pen with a date each and a quiet nod. Their pride is neat and deserved. The line slept well under their counting. At the post house, the clerk glances up from ash ink, remembers your blue thread letter, and taps the niche where he placed it. He has already tied it to this station's bundle. You accept his reed token for your ledger, a small, flat proof that a promise moved. A market now is only shapes where mats lay, a scatter of husks, the long comma of footprints turning toward fields. You pass through without asking it for more than it has left. A woman sweeps a rectangle with a date palm broom and leaves the dust in an even square. A man lifts a shutter with both hands and lets it lean against a wall like a folded sail. A kettle wakes. You hear its first wondering sound and wish it well. You guide the line to the canal bridge while the east is still the color of a pot that has not yet met fire. The boards show their long usage iron studs rubbed matte, edges softened by years of soles and hooves. Your note from yesterday sits ready in your mind. Third span wide. You step to the rail and test with your hand. The third plank bows with a slow courtesy. It is enough. You lead the first camel toward the outer edge, where the joist underneath keeps its promises. You add one slow word, the kind that lengthens the neck and shortens the step. The animal nods, places a wide foot where wood is truest, and crosses. The rest understand without speech. Bridges along watered routes were patched and kept by many hands, guilds, endowments, imperial crews. Travelers learned the local map of strength and shared such notes the way cooks share measures. Light collects a little. You follow the canal until the path tilts away from water toward a plain that has been swept by wind into something like order. The soil is fine as milled flour. The wind lays it down in faint lines that point where the road also points. You keep the bells muffled, not to hide, only to let the morning stay broad and empty for a while longer. A fork waits where two tracks part with almost no argument. One goes true and shallow, the other wider, promising speed. You kneel and listen with your fingers. The wide track carries the round scars of carts that cut deep when soft places soften. The shallow line keeps a wrist of older stones under its skin. You choose the track with a patience you can afford. Wayfinding along the long routes was more reading than pointing cairns and milestones, yes, but also the thin common sense of ground that has already carried weight and wishes to carry it again. Wind rises not to scold, just to remind. Dust lifts in thin sheets. It tastes faintly of gypsum. It settles along your lashes in a soft gray. A young camel fusses at the new feel, swinging its head to move the air away from its eyes. You step alongside, thumb and forefinger, gently closing the long lids so they learn to move like shutters. From your pouch, you draw a bit of cloth already prepared, a narrow band meant for glare days, and tie it loose behind the ears, a thin shade to teach comfort. You stroke the whirl at the neck. The head lowers, the breath deepens. Small lesson, learned. The sun decides at last and shows itself as a bright, calm coin. Shadows shorten. The plain finds its color, somewhere between linen and ash. Your counting begins 100 steps. Look back. 100 steps, tug a strap. 100 steps, a sip and a lick of salt. The animals fall into that old meter that doesn't belong to anyone and belongs to everyone who walks. You pass a low rise where someone stacked 3 stones, then 3 more. You add 1 knot to make a monument, only to say yes. A kestrel rides a draft to your right. Its wings barely move. The air does its share. A line of ants carries something sweet toward a home that is simply a better idea of dirt. The road can be a loud story. Today it prefers quiet handwriting. A small obstacle appears where the plain pretends to be smooth, and then remembers it is also a place where plants live. A thorn-hard, clever has taken lodging in a pad. The camel steps short. The bell loses its measure for 3 notes. You kneel, cradle the foot, and work the thorn out with a slow twist. You clean the place with water and the corner of your scarf, then rub a thin smear of fat across the pad so the edges of the wound meet without argument. The animal lets its weight down carefully, tests the ground, and agrees to go on. Camel pad skin like felt, fat like a quiet cushion carried weight across stones and salt. Care was simple and constant. Check, clean, cool, oil. The road repaid such attentions with more days. Mid-morning, you call a breathing halt on a patch of gravel that refuses to pretend it's comfortable. That's the virtue of it. Hooves don't dig. Loads don't slip. You ladle water, not full, not stingy. You chew a crease of bread and a date, then another sip, then a pause. The wind becomes something you can sit inside for a little while. You mend a strap's bragging thread with waxed linen. You trim a loose end and touch it to the flame, so it remembers to stay a thread and not a tail. Other walkers appear as compass points. A man with a pack frame crowned by folded felt, 3 women carrying bundles that smell faintly of dye, a boy with a goat that thinks the boy is a goat and must be followed. You exchange the road's brief grammar palms lifted, eyes softened, weight shifted to say, space shared. Someone mentions a toll house beyond a line of white stones. The man with felt calls the keeper fair, but exact. You write 1 word in the ledger margin. Exact. The toll house is a small square thought made of mud brick. 2 date palms stand near as witnesses. A chain lies coiled like a sleeping snake. It will be drawn across the track when the sun bites harder. You arrive while the shade is still deep on the door. The keeper has a ledger, too, and a scale he trusts, because it has never asked him to lie. He greets the first camel with the way he breathes out and looks at the load, not your face. Good. You have nothing to sell him but good order. You set your weights on his beam in the old order. Smallest first, then the one like a seed, then the one like half a loaf. He nods. Your measures match his story of the day. He marks your token with a small square of blue today's color and ties a string through it so it can live on your wrist until evening. Toll markers changed by color or corner cut to prevent last week's payments from becoming this week's arguments. Most kept their dignity by being simple and visible. A question follows, folded neatly. Do you carry messages? You show the reed token from the post house and the blank place where delivered letters can leave a reply. The keeper's wife brings a small roll tied with green, the seal impressed with a tamarisk leaf. Destination matches your next roof. You tuck it with the same care you give to jars in animals' knees. A cup of water follows, then another for your hand. You drink. You wet your pulse. You wet the cloth that minds your breath. The keeper's thanks are the kind that look like fairness tomorrow. Heat begins to gather its arguments. You answer by changing nothing quickly. Pace eases a fraction. Bells stay quiet under cloth. You shift 1 load lower by 2 fingers, and another higher by 1. You open your collar to the precise point where air can help without inviting the sun to make ladders of your bones. The animals chew their cuds and remember every good well they have ever seen. A fellow caravan falls in behind at a patient distance. Their rope work speaks a dialect you know, a pair from the river towns, by the way the knots sit close. You exchange the small signs that mean, if a strap fails, we will see it, and at noonshade, we will not crowd. This is how the road saves itself weight, by letting strangers be less strange for an hour. The plain gives way to a shelf of ground. It balances between 2 ideas of earth. To your left, a salt flat glitters too early in the day for comfort. Mirage already writes impossible blue bowls, and then lifts them away. To your right, low hummocks keep small shrubs cupped and green. You take the seam between hard, honest footing with modest shades stitched in when needed. A little gust runs ahead of something larger. You read its handwriting, no grit yet, only a draft. You pull a cloth over one jar's wicker, not two corners, and slip a spare kerchief into your own sleeve, where your hand will find it without thought. The dust passes with nothing to say. You put the cloth back in your pouch, rather than declare victory to sky or chance. Dust was a season, not an event. Veils and cloth bands were not theater. They were the unremarkable technology of lungs and eyes that wanted to work again tomorrow. Noon suggests itself by how the world feels underfoot. Your shadow is small and certain. The air hums near your ear, as if it wanted to whisper a recipe for heat. You look ahead for a low, sensible place, a shoulder of rock shading sand. A tamarisk whose roots have found some private agreement with hidden water. There, a dark fold where two shallow gullies agree to be cooler than their neighbors. You angle the line toward it and count a little slower. The bells give up their last notes to the moment before stillness. Hooves find the firm, the animals fold their legs, and the ground accepts their weight as if it had been keeping a place for them all morning. You set shallow bowls where shadows fall, and brew tea on a patient flame that knows better than to be in a hurry at noon. Water rises once, then rests. The first cup is small and almost entirely steam. The second is a little more. You pour a third and leave it near the rock for any passer with a dry throat and a clean hand. You tear bread, press a date against it, and lean your head back on your rolled cloak so your eyes see only a strip of sky and one steady cloud pretending not to move. You work while you rest. A stitch in a strap becomes two, then three. A chipped nail finds the file. A note in the ledger grows into a clearer line. Salt flat left keeps seam shade fold at two gullies. You press your small seal next to the words so that later, when all flat places look like one flat place, your eye will stop there and remember. A fly worries a camel's eye for a moment and then loses interest. You fan once. The camel flicks an ear and goes on thinking about nothing in particular, which is its gift to the day. Heat weighs less when you do not lift it. Your breath becomes the only clock you need. In, a pause. Out, a longer pause. The world settles an inch lower, and the plane gives back a quiet you have been keeping for it since dawn. When the shadow from the low rock reaches the small, agreed mark near your sandal, you will rise. You will bind the loads with hands that remember every strap's argument. You will follow the seam a little farther until the land offers the next fold of shade and the first story of evening. For now, let your shoulders soften. Let your eyes half close. Let the bells you muffled at dawn keep their quiet promises until it is time to ask them for one soft syllable each. We'll lift the line again in the next chapter, when the salt flat ceases to pretend and the air begins to ring with sun. And we'll carry this calm across white ground toward the promise of a walled garden at day's end. You rise when the rock's shadow reaches the small notch you made with your heel. Cloak to roll, roll to strap. Strap to the same knot your fingers prefer at this hour. Ash is coaxed to a glow. The flame answers politely, and then you pinch it closed. Bowls wiped. A last cool sip. The road takes its shape again. You speak the first word of movement low, even, and the line lengthens. Bells remain muffled. Their silence feels correct, like closing a door softly in a sleeping house. The plain ahead turns pale and paler until it becomes a white sheet laid flat by the wind. The salt flat waits. Not a glare yet, just a brightness that asks for respect. Sound, texture, smell. Crust crackles under the first steps. Cloth stiffened by dried sweat brushes your wrist. The air carries a mineral note, a clean, almost sweet dryness like sun on stone. You dampen the cloth across your mouth and settle it higher on your cheekbones. A strip of indigo-dyed linen becomes a shade for your eyes. You knot it loosely behind your ears, a band casting a fine, useful dusk. On bright ground salt, sand, Snow traders used narrow bands and indigo headcloths to temper glare. Shade you can carry weighs less than shade you must find. The first 100 paces become instruction. Some patches ring hollow. Others hold a dull, friendly thud. You mark the friendlier path with your eyes. Darker seams running like faint rivers beneath the crust. The animals learn it. 2 pads seek the soft, then the firm, and you agree together on what is safest. A small obstacle introduces itself as if clearing its throat. Mirage lifts bowls of blue where you know only white should be. The horizon becomes a magician's table. Water appears, then slides away. You kneel and plant your walking stick as a short gnomon. Its shadow shortens, then leans. You note the lean against your palm 2-finger angle to the right and set your bearing by shadow as much as by sight. You'll check again after 100 counts. With few waymarks, merchants kept bearings by small instruments and smaller habits. A stick shadow, wind-scored ripples, old wheel lines, the sun's rise and its honest fall. Heat gathers not as a shout, but as a steady hand on your back. You answer with measure rather than fight. 1 sip each hour, not a prideful one. A pinch of salt under the tongue to invite water to stay. A mouthful swirled, then swallowed slowly, so the throat remembers dusk is coming. For the animals, you pace to protect breath. Longer strides when breeze lifts, shorter when air sits. A creak speaks from the 3rd string reed rap against wicker. You walk back, palm against the jar's side. The sound repeats. A conversation you can fix. You plane a thin sliver from a date palm rib, slide it between wrap and reed, and bind once, twice with waxed thread. The creak quiets as if it had never leaned toward trouble. Fragile goods crossed white ground by the grace of small wedges, pitch, and patience. Journeys arrive whole when each hour learns to be repaired. Glare presses in. You answer by narrowing the world to what helps your counting, the tone of pads on crust, the light draft at your throat. A kestrel writes a single straight line across the white. You let your gaze follow the bird to rest your eyes. When you return them to the ground, details are easier again. Midway across, the crust changes its manners. Thin flakes lift at the edge of each step, clicking back like the lid of a jar. A young camel lifts a foot quickly, uncertain. You call a short halt and lift the pad in both hands, dusting away the salt crumbs. A thumbnail-sized shard sits where it should not. You twist it free, wet a corner of your scarf, and wipe the pad so the skin can lie smooth again. A smear of oil, a slow massage of the edges. The foot relaxes and sets itself down with a satisfied weight. Camel pads thick, living felt take kindness well. A clean pad, a thin coat of fat, and even pressure were the daily grammar of long-distance comfort. Mirage builds bowls again. You check your stick. Shadow now leans a finger width the other way. Goodure bearing holds. A line of low cairns appears at last 3 stone humps set by hands that want tomorrow to owe them nothing. You pass each with a small salute of 2 fingers to your brow. A habit that makes the day feel tidier. A sideways breeze arrives, carrying the dry scent of far time. Dust rises in a veil no higher than your knee. You pull a spare kerchief over the jar on the outside of the 2nd string and tie 2 quick corners. You moisten your own face cloth barely, enough to turn the dust into a thought that passes rather than a thought that stays. The veil moves on without argument. Dust was treated like weather, not an opponent. Veils, damp cloth, and pacing were the quiet tools. Arguments with wind only enlarge the wind. A caravan falls in at a courteous distance, 4 animals, 2 handlers, 1 small cart. Their bells carry a higher note. Their ropes are the flat, tightly spun kind from river towns. The cart's right wheel sings, a tired, complaining thread. At a shallow rise, it sinks a little and sulks. You slow your line and walk back. The axle strap has tired where it loops the crossbeam. You take out palm fiber rope and offer the middle grade. Better than regret, you say with your eyes. Together, in few words, you lay a Spanish windlass. Stick through the loop, twist, twist, bind, knot. The wheel straightens its song. Aid on the road traveled quickly in both directions. A length of rope one day, a shared draft, or a warning the next. Settlement law rarely reached this far, so habit wrote its own code. You trade nothing formal. The handler presses 2 dried apricots into your palm fragrance like sunlight kept for a winter. You tuck them into the ledger's flap. He taps his brow toward your animals. You answer with a small circle of your hand that means good work to your good work, and return to the front. Heat steadies into a tone your bones can recognize. You cool wrists in the hollow behind your knees with the last of the morning water and give the animals a thin trickle at the corners of their mouths to rinse the taste of salt. No waste, just respect. The crust underfoot grows paler still, then shows its first peppering of grit-playing ground returning. You say the small word that means well done and feel the line breathe. A low stand of tamarisk waits where white gives way to beige. Its shade is modest, but thoughtful. You call a halt under its thin green. Water is ladled, shallow bowls, steady hands. Tea is not for heat like this, but you rinse a cup and steep quince peel for a breath, just enough to perfume the water with a cool idea. You press the damp cloth along your jaw, then fold it for the crown of a fretful animal. Everyone's face looks more content. Sour-sweet infusions, quince, barberry, sumac softened harsh water, and coax thirst back into a manageable rhythm on hot marshes. A small ledger task. You take a stylus and press 3 dots in a triangle on the strap you replaced last week, the mark you used to say, check twice, still true. Your thumb rests there for a beat, longer than needed. The strap answers with a low, even creak. Good. You move again, now over ground that knows how to accept a hoof without pretending to be anything else. The air loses its glassy edge. A distant line of date palms rises from the horizon, as if someone has drawn them with a careful brush. Between 2 trunks, a square of wall shows itself mud brick, sun-baked, the color of almonds. A walled garden. Perhaps a little water at its heart. Perhaps a clean ledger and a square of shade. The path runs through low hummocks, where scrub keeps its greenness under its own shadow. Birds lift and set like commas. A clay milestone leans, its inscription rubbed to almost no meaning by time and fingers. You touch it and decide it says, near enough. A final small obstacle behaves itself into being. The outer gate of the garden stands open, but the inner door is resting on its hinge block, half closed against late arrivals who like to make themselves into surprises. You stop your animals 2 cart lengths back room enough to change your mind, room enough for theirs. You step to the side and wait for the keeper to see you, rather than to be told you are there. He does lean figure, eyes that have learned the day's sighs. You show hands empty, then your token, then your palm low in the sign that says, quiet trade, overnight only. He weighs your line with a glance loads neat, bells muffled, no harshness in the animal's breathing. He lifts the door, sets it with a wooden foot, and makes space. Caravan Gardens WAQ funded, guild-kept, family-run, were small islands of shade and trust. Rules were few and durable. Water steady, straw clean, fire low, speech lower. Inside, the light is different. It has passed through leaves and learned manners. A channel of water, no wider than a belt, runs at knee height along the inside of the wall, its sides plastered smooth as eggshell. You tip a bowl until the meniscus kisses the rim, and then lift it toward the animal's pans. One for eagerness, one for patience, one for the elder who has carried well. You undo girths, pack sigh. You rub the high rib where weight sat longest. You find the whorl behind an ear, the place where a scratch means gratitude more than fuss. The animals fold as if they rehearsed this exact floor. Their breath slows into the long, even sentences of rest. The keeper's wife brings a tray thin bread, a pinch of olives, a small dish of cucumber with yogurt, and a leaf of mint pressed to the side. You pay in coin, and in one measure of salt. She sets an extra cup near your elbow, without looking as if it were a gift. You take it without looking as if it were a debt. You brew nothing hot. Instead, you steep a few leaves in cool water, and let time do more of the work. You chew an apricot from the ledger flap. The fruit tastes like kept promises. You close your eyes for a breath, and see white ground again. Only now, it is a memory already losing its corners. There is a ledge along the wall meant for ledgers and elbows. You open yours and enter the day in small. Patient lines. White ground shadow measure good. Reed wedge quieted jar. Third span wide crossed. Rope shared cart mended. Walled garden shade true. You press your little pomegranate seal beside the words. Not necessity, just approval. Many traders recorded the route in a parallel column conditions, kindnesses, hazards, notes. That would feed the next year S choices, and the choices of a friend's friend, whose name they might never know. You mend while the cool gathers. A strap's edge meets waxed thread. A crate lip meets the knife's gentler face. Pitch is warmed with palm heat and persuaded into a shallow seam along wicker. Each task is small enough to finish. Each finish makes the next hour feel lighter. Evening climbs the wall. The keeper dusts the path with a soft broom, so footfalls will sound like a story told quietly. A child pours water into the root of a fig. The fig does not hurry to respond. A blackbird drinks from the lip of the channel and leaves one perfect oval of wet where it stood. You lay out your sleeping things with the same order as the morning. Sandals under the roll. Ledger within reach. Knife sheathed and under cloth, pointing toward home out of habit, which is to say, toward wherever you will be tomorrow night. You fold your scarf into a low, friendly pillow and let your neck be pleased by the small invention. From somewhere near the gate, a reed flute turns the air a shade bluer. It plays a line with more space than notes. The garden keeps it, and so do you. Lamps are lit, their flames wear small hats of clay. Moths approach, reconsider, and choose the darker leaves. Voices drop into a common, comfortable pitch. You lie back and let the day leave in good order. Salt softens into distance. White ground becomes a pale ribbon in your mind, tied now to this square of shade, to this clear channel, to this wall that learned to be cool by standing still. Breath in, hold, breath out, longer. Bells, unmuffled now, make one final syllable as an animal shifts to a better dream. We all meet morning, softer color in the next chapter, when the garden opens its gate to a lane of pomegranates, and the road bends toward a town of paper and ink, where the day's work is not only walking, but weighing words as carefully as you weigh silk. You wake before the garden decides what to do with its shade. Water threads along the wall in a narrow channel, practicing the sound it will make all day. A fig leaf brushes the plaster. A bird hops twice and considers the bowl you left by the stones. Leather under your palm has cooled into a friendly stiffness that is easy to read. Cloak to roll, roll to strap. The knots sit where your fingers expect them. You run a thumb along a strap's edge, feel the wax you set last night, and nod to work you won't have to do again. The keeper unlatches the gate with a wooden sigh. Outside, a lane of pomegranates runs like a low red-green procession. Sound, texture, smell. Dew ticks from leaf to leaf. Dust underfoot is sifted fine as flour. The air carries the faint tannic sweetness of pomegranate rind. You guide the first camel through the narrow, leaf-dappled light. Bells stay muffled. Your shoulder brushes a low branch. A bead of dew breaks and cools the back of your hand. A small obstacle asks politely for attention. The lane is tight, and a young animal dislikes the close hedge. Its head angles, breath quickening. You step alongside, shorten the lead by a hand's length, and lay your palm where the neck whirls. The hedge brushes your sleeve instead of its eye. You speak the word that lowers a stride without lowering the spirit. The animal settles. The lane widens because your patience makes it feel that way. Many garden lanes on the routes were endowments. W.A., Q.F., kept for shade and water. Etiquette's low pace, bells rapped, branches unbroken, was older than any posted sign. The town gathers ahead, has a conversation that has not yet raised its voice. Low walls, a watchtower with sun darkening one face, a square gate whose hinges know the weight of morning. Today's token on your wrist blue square from the toll house will need a local mark. You line up where the stone curb is rubbed smooth by the softness of hooves, and you wait your turn with the kind of stillness that keeps the day from wrinkling. At the tablet desk, a clerk lifts his brush without looking hurried. His inkstone breathes the slow tide of water and soot. He reads your beam, your loads, your animal's breath before he reads your face. Respect finds its level. He presses a small red stamp beside your blue, then notches the token's corner with a reed blade. Mark, color, notch. Today's grammar. Gate marks varied by town die, stamp, corner cut, so last week's tokens could not become this week's stories. The language was visual. Even a sleepy guard could read it. Inside, the street narrows into purpose. This quarter keeps paper and the things that lean on it. Inks, brushes, stamps, cords, threads. A water wheel turns somewhere out of sight. You feel its patient pulse in the ground before you hear it. Sound, texture. Smell. Wooden mallets thud rhythmically over rag pulp. Decal screens clap and lift, clap and lift. The air holds wet fiber, lamp black, a touch of gum, and something sweet, maybe clove, from a chest of ink cakes. You walk the line to a shaded hitching rail near the door of a scribe who has seen you at 2 other roofs. His signboard shows a swift brush, curling into a pomegranate blossom, not because it is your emblem, but because people like the thought that writing can turn into fruit. You hand the reins to the boy who minds the rail, point to water, then to shade. He nods like a bell that knows its job. A small timing knot arrives. The scribe's door is latched from within. He keeps the hour before sun for sharpening and quiet. A chalk mark on the jamb says he will open when the shadow at the threshold touches a line he scratched last spring. Not long, but longer than your impatience would prefer if you let it grow. You use the minutes the way the quarter uses rag ends. Rope first. You choose 2 lengths of palm fiber, middle grade binding, not hauling. Threads. A skein of waxed linen for straps that like to tell stories. Pitch. 2 small cakes wrapped in leaf ribbing, pressed flat so they warm against your palm when you need them. The ink seller lets you test a cake on the stone soot and glue, no grit. It rises to the brush like a promise. You add a thumb of vermilion paste the red that seals listen to. Papermaking reached west across these routes by the 8th century. Places like Samarkand learned to beat linen and mulberry into sheets that took ink kindly. Ink, cake soot, and binder traveled better than liquid. A brush woke them at the day's pace. When the shadow kisses the chalk line, the latch lifts. The room inside is a deep, even shade. Light comes in like a polite visitor and stops where it should. You step across the threshold and pause. Shoes stay on in this shop, but hands should be clean. You wet your fingertips at the basin, dry them on a cloth, and hold the letter with both hands so the green thread reads as care, not only color. From the canal garden, you say with your eyes more than your mouth. He receives the letter with 2 hands, notes the intact thread, and presses a small seal into your reed tag custody moving like water down a channel. He opens the letter and nods once, the nod of someone who has found what he expected, but still likes to find it. He warms a stick of wax, sets a fresh seal on the reply he has already prepared, and slides it into a sleeve of oiled paper. The sleeve is clever stiff at the mouth, so fingers don't bruise the pages. Soft at the body so it rides, not fights. A small obstacle, tidy as a comma. The wax on your incoming letter shows a hairline crack from yesterday's heat. Not broken, but tired. You set your palm over it and let the warmth convince the edges to greet again. The scribe watches without fuss and offers a tiny brush to smooth the face. Wax forgets its worry. The letter seal remembers itself. He asks, with a tilt of the brush, if you will carry an account list to the next station. Numbers, items, and 3 names to match them, copied twice. He names a courier's fee with his eyes fair. If you count trust as weight, you agree. While he writes, you watch the steady mills of his hands. The brush lays down lines that are more standing up than lying down. The paper seems to take ink with relief. He dusts the sheet with a soft tap of ash and folds it over a cord so the fold lives longer than a season. You step back into the street's shade and find a man with a sample book of thread waiting like a dog sleeper, not pressing, only near. He shows a silk the color of pistachio shells. You test it against a square of your own. Your dye reads truer in morning. The man grins as if to say, your river was more patient than mine. You buy nothing, and somehow trade still happens. He names a dyer north of this gate whose indigo does not rub. You note it in your ledger's narrow column where non-weights live. Sample book swatches, twists, thumb-sized cakes of pigment-let traders speak a quiet language across counters. Many bought with the eye, but closed with the hand. The feel of fiber told the truth the tongue wanted to. The water wheel's pulse becomes a drumbeat to the rest of your errands. At the paper shop, you choose a sheaf with a decal edge like soft teeth, sheets dried against smooth boards so the surface is calm. The keeper fans the stack once. The paper breathes, then rests. You add a bundle of cord for string ties and a little packet of starch for mending tears in sleeves and pages alike. A stall selling brushes offers 3 hairs and 3 tempers. The first drinks too quickly. The second refuses to wake. The third lifts ink as if it were gossip and then forgets it once the talk is done. You pick the third. The seller drops a single horsehair into the ferrule to teach it humility. Small lessons carried in small spaces. A time puzzle now. In this town, the bazaar closes for the hour when sun stands like a spear over the square. 2 shutters clap, then 4, then 20. Heat will have the streets to itself for a little while. You choose a lane with a shade that remembers yesterday's clouds and sit in the cool just inside a threshold. Lunch is modest bread pressed against cucumber, yogurt folded with mint, a pinch of salt that makes water truer. You brew nothing hot. You steep a thin curl of quince peel in a cup of cool and let it teach the water how to be interesting without standing up. While shutters nap, you work. A strap whose thread flirted with the idea of fraying is persuaded back into the business of being thread. A crate lip that announced itself to your palm yesterday is planed until your hand forgets it was ever loud. You press your little pomegranate seal into the ledger next to 3 new lines. Ink clean, wakes kindly, paper quiet, gate mark red with notch. These are not weights, but they balance the day. When the bazaar exhales and opens again, you return to the scribe. He hands you 2 letters, the reply for the canal garden and the account for the next station. Tied with the green thread you now recognize as this quarter's shorthand for paper business mind dryness. You slide them into your ledger's belly, where jolts are kindest. He will not take coin for the extra sealing. You leave a small measure of salt on the desk's corner. He pretends the salt was there when the desk was built. Back at the rail, your animals stand in the geometry of patience. Sound, texture, Smell. A jaw works slowly. A rope rests comfortably against the flat of a neck. The quarter's air has become afternoon ink drawing hot plaster. A whisper of cardamom from a kettle 2 doors down. You water lightly, just enough to rinse dust, and set shallow pans so younger mouths can learn not to hurry. You loosen and retighten 2 girths so leather remembers the shapes it needs for the road. A small etiquette ripple arrives and folds itself away. A cart wants your space at the rail. Its driver looks not at you, but at the gap your leaving would make. You meet his eyes, touch your brow, and point to the sun's angle, then to your token, then to the gate. You will be gone in 100 breaths. He counts maybe 20, smiles, and takes the corner instead. Streets work when people do. In busy quarters, gestures carried clocks. A pointed brow, a tilted poem. A chin toward shadow-length craftspeople knew how to tell time without numbers where time was shared. You walk the line once more before moving. A reed wedge you set in the salt flat sits proud by a whisper. You press it home. A knot you tied left-handed last night is right enough, but you replace it with a knot that will make your hands happier at dusk. You touch each ear whirl in passing and say the word that means let's. The paper quarter lets you go with the same courtesy it used to greet you. A boy with ink on his thumb carries a tray across the lane without spilling. A woman brushes pulp fibers from her sleeves. The water wheel keeps counting. At the gate, the clerk lifts his brush again, adds a second red stamp to your blue. This one set at a different angle that tells the wall you are leaving, not coming. The notch on your token now makes a small square missing from one corner. A neat way to say, this day had an edge, and you passed it. The world outside the gate feels wider by 3 quiet measures. To your left, kill smoke lifts in mild threads Potter's Quarter on the far side of a low hill. To your right, reeds mark the canal's return to modest talk. You choose the canal path to keep dust polite. The animals tilt their heads toward the water, and then away again, content to walk with the promise of it near. You keep your bells half-wrapped one, fold less than morning, so the sound feels like a conversation rather than a reminder. The road bends where a stand of tamarisk has convinced the wind to try elsewhere. You let your breath lengthen to match the bend. The town's ink and paper smell falls behind and becomes a thin ribbon in memory, tied to your ledger's new marks, and the green thread letters cooling under oiled paper. Ahead, the lane lifts toward low hills, where kill lights will be brighter than stars for an hour, and then fold themselves to coals. Potters work at night, for reasons the day only partly understands. There will be a square where the ground is reheated clay, too warm for paws and pleasant for feet. There will be cups cooling on racks, and a woman who will sell you one with a line in the glaze that looks like a road. Let your shoulders drop a finger width. Let your jaw soften. Feel the weight of the letters riding in the safe place you made for them. We'll climb the easy hill in the next chapter and walk through the pottery as breath. Then turn our line toward a broad valley where night markets speak more softly than day ones, and lamps teach stars how to shine near people. The lane lifts in a way, your ankles like no hurry, just a steady thought toward the ridge. Kill smoke draws fine gray letters against the late sky, each column a sentence that will end in bowls and jars. Your bells are half-wrapped. They speak as if they were being careful not to wake a sleeping house. Sound, texture, smell, a low draft sighs through chimney mouths, grit under sandal soft as ground salt. The air carries warm clay, pine ash, and a faint sweetness from straw that met flame and changed its mind. You guide the line up a slope glazed by many feet. Heat rises in gentle breaths from earth that remembers yesterday's firing. A small obstacle arrives honest and simple. The youngest camel hesitates where the path crosses a spill of warm. Kill waste shards mixed with ash pressed into a brittle crust. You shorten the lead by a hand's length. Lay your palm at the next whirl, and speak the word that lowers the head without lowering the spirit. Step, test. Step. The crust accepts the weight, and you angle the string to firmer ground. Many kill hills used wasters to level paths, discarded shards, and clinker set into the track. Cheap paving, warm at night, kind to carts that hated mud. At the first kill terrace, a woman turns a long paddle inside a dragon's mouth of brick. Her sleeve is singed in patterns that read like a map of careful mistakes. A boy counts time with split bamboo. Tap dash, pause dash tap. In the drying shed, cups rest on racks like small moons, glaze still the color of thought before it becomes glass. You stop the line where heat is a comfort, not a demand, and let backs breathe. You buy water by the ladle from the trough fed by a tile channel. It knocks once against the lip as if to ask permission, and then slides into your shallow pans. You set the first bowl for the young, the second for the elder, the third for patience. A potter lifts a cup with tongs and lays it on a board to cool. The glaze breathes, skin of light, then settles. Updraft and downdraft kilns along the trade roads used pine, tamarisk, or dried dung. Firing run stack, seal, stoke, watch, cool lasted through night. Potters read fire by sound and color as much as by numbers. A cart ahead tries to squeeze past a stack of still warm saggers. The wheel catches in a shallow rut and sulks. You hand your lead rope to the railboy and step forward with the cartman. A palm fiber line, a stick for a Spanish windlass twist, bind, the wheel lifts back into its day. The cartman presses a token into your palm, thin as a fingernail, stamped with a kill mark in the shape of a small fish. You slide it into the ledger flap. Small favors like to travel with paper. Moths begin to question the lamplight. The hill dips toward a square that holds its warmth like a kept secret. Here the night market breathes, a hush of voices, ladles tapping bowls, scales tipping and righting themselves as if practicing for morning. Lamps hang from a cord in even intervals. Each flame wears a little clay hat and minds its own pool of light. Sound, texture, smell. A ladle finds the rim and says enough. Lacquered chopsticks click softly. The air carries broth with ginger, hot clay, and the green breath of cut scallion. You tie your line at a hitching rail rubbed satin by many good halters, and wipe the dust from your palms on a cloth that has seen more useful nights than proud days. A small etiquette matter walks up wearing the face of a favor. A hawker asks if you will shift your string a hand's breadth to make space for a neighbor as stall. Your animals have found their geometry and do not love to redraw it. You weigh once, then nod move 2 steps, retie, palm on a shoulder to say thank you to a patient beast. The hawker hands you a clay chip stamped with a crescent good for broth. You accept. He glows the way small economies glow when everyone wins a little. In many towns, night markets were once regulated, even forbidden. Along trade corridors, custom bent toward permission. Shorter hours, low lamps, quieter voices, stewards who kept the peace with presence more than rule. You eat leaning against the cool side of a kill wall. The bowl's rim is perfect where a thumb would want it. Broth rises, ginger, bone, a thread of sesame. You fold bread into it. It softens without surrendering. You leave a sip in the bottom and set the bowl near the edge of light. A cat with kill dust paws arrives and finishes the thought for you. A money changer works from a plank by lamplight. Shrey cut into squares copper here, clipped silver there, test weights nested like small moons. You change a broad coin rubbed thin by many people-ace plans into a handful of sensible coppers. He tests 2 for you without being asked, flick toothier, sets them aside with a shrug. Trust is a small light. It makes the next hour easier to read. You buy what the road asks for next. 2 cakes of pine pitch wrapped in leaf ribbing, a skein of waxed thread, a palm-sized felt patch, a new reed wedge for a jar that likes to creak when the air is dry. From the brush cellar, You choose a cheap broom bound with rawhide good for sweeping shards from a resting place before hooves meet them. The broom's handle is smooth where 100 hands have taught it manners. A kilnswoman brings out a tray of cups laid the width of 2 fingers apart. She speaks with her eyebrows and a tilt of chin. These cooled long enough to be touched. Those have not. You run a fingertip across one safe rim and feel the faint grit that says the glaze wanted to be glass and will finish the job tonight. You choose 3 cups too for trade, one to ride in your kit as a traveling kindness. She wraps them in newspaper from a far place. Its characters look like reeds at night. Cheap paper from print shops near kilns became wrappers, and then, traveling farther, became notes double work for a single sheet. A string player tunes a 2-string fiddle near the edge of light. The tune he finds has no hurry, and therefore no end. A frame drum nods once every few breaths, as if agreeing to be present rather than loud. A scribe, sleeves rolled, writes for a man who speaks in a hush. Ash dusts each line so the night won't smudge it. Ink dries slower in warm air. It prefers to be certain. You mend before the day forgets its details. A strap whose thread looked like it wanted a story becomes a strap again. Waxed linen smooths and hides the impulse. A crate lip offers a splinter to an unwary hand. You plane it until the knife no longer speaks. You warm pitch with your palm and persuade it into the seam of a wicker that lives near heat. It agrees to stay there and be useful. A small obstacle arrives with good intentions. A boy from a neighboring line brings a bowl too close to a curious muzzle. The camel breathes in long, honest, and the bowl becomes less full than before it began. You smile, angle the bowl away, and pour a little into a pan at hoof height. Lesson learned by boy, camel, and bowl gentle, quick, complete. You deliver the green thread letters to the post clerk, who keeps a low door and a lamp with a steady heart. He counts without moving his lips, presses a reed stamp that smells faintly of olive oil, and slides the packets into a wall pocket cool as a well. Your weed tag receives a second mark. Custody moves like water downhill and feels right in the bones. Night offices logged receipts by lamp and ash. Tags read, wood, Clay carried 2 truths at once. I gave, and you took. Small proofs kept long roads honest. The hour when lamps burn most calmly arrives. You step away from heat and into the small square where air is decided to be night. You stretch the line of animals, rub the high rib where the weight likes to sit, and then scratch the earwhirl that means more gratitude than words. A knee clicks. A jaw slows. Breath becomes the sound the square was hoping for. A steward with hands like wooden spoons walks the lanes. He lifts a lamp to discourage a careless spark, then sets it down lower, where moths are less tempted to think too well of themselves. He nods to you with that working person's nod. I see your care. Carry on. You answer with the quiet wave that implies the same. You settle near a warm wall that has decided to be fully friendly now that it has finished its day's labor. Cloak to roll. Roll to pillow. Ledger under your palm, so it knows where you are. You write 4 lines. Kill hill good paving warm. Cart windlass straightened. Night market lamps low fair measures. Letters post 2 marks. You press the little pomegranate beside them. Not necessary, but pleasant. A gust tries the square once. You put a pebble on the corner of a cloth, and it thinks better of it. A moth lands on your sleeve and rereads your thread for meaning. You breathe with the rhythm of the drum far off every 4th heartbeat it remembers to speak. The sky above the lamplands offers 5 good stars and 2 that are working on being good. Clouds keep their counsel near the horizon. You think ahead by one small valley. A run of irrigated fields, a ford that takes feet kindly, a low orchard where someone will sell fruit still smelling like leaf. There will be a steward at a gate whose mark is saffron-colored, not red. There'll be a stretch where the road shares itself with a dyer's vats. Cloth will hang like little evenings from poles and set the air humming with indigo. For now, you place your sandals under the roll, your knife sheathed under cloth, your new cup within reach. Your breath lengthens. The wall at your back moves from warm to exactly right. Bells unwrapped now offer one last syllable as an animal dreams and turns. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands be heavy. Let the kiln's last warmth become a blanket that doesn't ask for thanks. We'll follow the slope down in the next chapter toward the river fields and the dyer's quarter, where water thick with color writes a slower story. And the day will teach us how to carry blue without wearing it. Dawn loosens the Kill Hill's last warmth and trades it for a breath that smells faintly of wet clay. You fold the night with practiced hands cloaked to roll to strap and touch each knot as if greeting a familiar line in a favorite book. Bells are wrapped half once, not to hide, only to keep the morning from echoing more than it needs to. You speak the low word that means begin, and the caravan remembers its shape, sound, texture, smell. Sparrows argue softly in the eaves. The path under sandal has the fine grit of cooled ash. The air offers ginger, pine soot, and the clean promise of fields beyond the ridge. You take the slope down single file, the animals easing their weight as if reading the same sentence you are, here, breath there, then the flat. A ribbon of irrigation channels unfurls beneath you silver, then clay brown, then silver again, where sunlight finds a corner. Cotton heads nod. Barley shows a green, so young it still feels like an idea. You angle the line to the bank of the first canal and let backs breathe. A boy lifts a floodgate with both hands. Water walks itself into a furrow with the steady patience of a long road. A small obstacle asks for your narrower attention. The path shares itself with a dyer's yard for the length of a field. Indigo vats sit like low moons, their rims stained the blue of evening. Ropes hung with cloth cross above the lane. Damp hems swing just at ear height. A young camel tests the air, uncertain of this strong, leafy scent. You shorten the lead by a hand's length. Lay your palm along the neck whorl and speak the word that lowers a stride without lowering a spirit. You guide the string through in a line so tidy, the cloth barely thinks to brush you. Indigo, even when kept quiet under ash, breathes a sweet mineral smell. Vats were often set near flowing water, where rinsing did not argue with neighbors, and the sun could mind the drying frames. The dyer glances up from his paddle, reads your order, and lifts the frame nearest the lane, just high enough for courtesy. You nod. He nods. A woman at the far trough skims scum from a pot with a palm leaf and flicks it back to the vat with a practiced twist. A child runs past with both hands held high, palms blue, fingers splayed so the color won't choose the road by mistake. You smile without showing teeth and keep the bells soft. Where the dyers end, an orchard begins. Pomegranate and fig share a low wall, trunks painted white up to the place where sun loses interest in bark. You guide the line under dappled shade and stop at a shallow trough built into the wall tile smooth, water moving not quickly, not slow. You set 2 pans for the young ones first, one for age, one for appetite. A tiny etiquette knot comes and goes like a breeze. 2 strings arrive at once, and the trough offers only room for one. You touch your brow, lift 2 fingers, the road's polite arithmetic, then open your palm toward the shade, an invitation to share. The other handler bows with his chin, waits half a dozen breaths, longer than required, and everyone drinks as if patience had flavor. At field-edge troughs, the rule was older than chalked signs, young mouths first, then elders, then anyone carrying news. People drank last, and only after their hands knew the animals had no questions. You buy fruit by weight, not by handful. The cellar scale shows a careful nest of stones, thumb-sized, walnut, egg, loaf. You set 2 silk-wrapped coins. He tests them with a nail and a small, satisfied hum. He adds a sprig of mint to the bag without naming it a gift. You add a pinch of salt to the table without naming it a price. The road balances itself with these quiet exchanges. The lane turns toward a ford where the river is shallow enough to speak in several voices at once. You test the first step with a stick. The bed is pebbled, friendly. Sound, texture, smell. Water knocks small syllables against stone. Wet leather darkens under your palm. The air carries reed, silt, and a sudden cool that lives at knee height. You angle the first camel slightly upstream, give the line slack enough to learn, and keep your own feet where stones stay honest. A small complication rides the current. A ribbon of duckweed has drifted to the near bank, turning the edge to a false floor. The second camel eyes it like a problem that wants to become larger. You tap the water with the stick and drag a clear lane, slow, a channel just wide enough for confidence. The animal lowers its head, snorts once, and steps true. Fords were maps that changed their handwriting with each rain. Travelers learned to read shadow and color. True depth is darker. Current writes diagonals. Weed makes floors where none exist. Across the water, the road meets a tall shade, a square roof on 4 poles draped with a saffron cloth that turns light into honey. The keeper's ledger has a clean edge and corners that have learned to be handled. You set your weights in the old order. His beam agrees without argument. He marks today's token with a saffron smear and a neat diagonal, then ties it with a thin cord to your wrist. He asks, without pressing, if you carry letters. You turn your ledger so the green thread sleeves are plain to see. He slides one slim packet from a reed tube seal impressed with a tamarisk leaf, the wax wearing a heat-soft smile. Destination matches your next roof. You add it to your inner flap where jolts are kindest and show him the place it will ride. He answers with a cool cup and a nod that carries the weight of a favor he may ask some other month. Heat climbs the day, but not like a wall. More like a long sentence that needs shorter words. You answer with pace. Longer stride when the breeze visits, shorter when it forgets. Bells unwrapped one fold, then wrapped again when the lane narrows to pass a cart loaded with jarnicks peering like curious birds. The cartman points with his chin to the better ground. You point with your eyes to the place where your line will leave him room. Streets work when people do. Midday finds you at a garden gate you half expected and half hoped for. The keeper is the kind of quiet that turns into help before it is asked. Inside shade, water threaded along a wall, a ledge for ledgers and elbows. You set bowls, undo girths, and rub the high rib that remembers weight. The animals fold as if a floor had told them their names. You deliver the green thread letters to the post, niche a tile-cooled mouth in the wall. The clerk marks your reed tag with a second sign, then dusts the face of the wax with ash so the seal's memory will keep its shape. You breathe easier. Promises have moved. One more small repair in the hour when work feels like rest. A reed wedge proud by a whisper is pressed home. A strap that wanted to talk is reminded to be a strap. A crate lip that dared your hand is planed until it meets your palm like an old friend. You record 5 lines, neat as a done day. Indigo yardcloth high bells soft. Orchard trough shared shade fair, turn. Fordweed false floor stick lane. Toll shade saffron mark letter added. Garden water true animals easy. You press the little pomegranate into warm wax by the margin, not because anyone will check it, but because approval likes a shape. Many merchants kept a second column in their books conditions, courtesies, hazards. It was not accounting. It was memory built for sharing. The way roads stay useful when names change. Evening approaches as if it had been saving itself for this courtyard. Lamps take small breaths. A reed flute somewhere plays a line that doesn't need an ending. You buy 1 clay cup from the keeper's wife unfussy glaze, lip that knows a thumb, and rinse it at the channel. Water moves like silk. The cup drinks first, and then hands it back. You eat without ceremony flatbread folded around cucumber and mint, a fig, a pinch of salt. You steep nothing hot. You let cool water carry quince peel for a quiet minute, and then let it be water again. The animals sigh in the long, even sentences that mean sleep. A moth lands on your sleeve and decides the world is probably fine. You lay your sleeping roll with the order that makes morning easier. Sandals under cloth. Knife sheathed, pointing toward where you will go if you must. Letters delivered. Ledger closed with the soft crackle that says pages remember being turned. You rest your palm on the cover a moment longer than needed. The road has counted you today. You have counted it back. If your eyes are heavy now, that's correct. Let them half close. Let your jaw soften. Let the weight leave your shoulders the way the day leaves the wall, inch by friendly inch. Tomorrow's track is real, but it doesn't need you yet. Somewhere beyond this gate, there's another kill, another orchard, another clerk with a careful brush. And there is also this square of shade, this channel of water, this quiet cup cooling in your hand. Bells make one last syllable as an animal adjusts to a better dream. The garden keeps your breath the way a good roof keeps warmth. The road loosens its hand and promises to be where you left it. You wake when the garden is still thinking about shade. Water whispers along the wall as if rehearsing the day's line. Cloak to roll, roll to strap. Strap to the knot your fingers like best at this hour. You run a thumb along last night, waxed thread, and feel that it has decided to behave. Bells get a half rap again, not secrecy, just courtesy to the morning. Sound, texture, smell. A broom combs dust into a neat line at the far gate. The flagstones under your sandal are cool and even. The air carries damp plaster, mint from somebody's basin, and the faint starch sweet of drying linen. You speak the low word that means begin. The caravan answers by becoming itself. You pass beneath the gate's lintel with a small bow of the head you don't think about anymore. The lane beyond is a ribbon of pale clay that remembers every foot and forgets none. A baker's kill gives one soft breath of warm yeast. A woman tips her pitcher and sends a bright seam of water into a jar. She doesn't look up, but she knows you passed. A small obstacle introduces itself without drama. The first corner is tighter than the loads would prefer. The young camel lifts its head, thinking bigger thoughts than the alley allows. You shorten the lead by a hand's width, lay your palm in the neck whirl, and turn your own shoulders first so the animal can follow your shape. The corner becomes a sentence with an easy comma instead of a snag. In close quarters, handlers often showed turns with their own body's head. Shoulder, hip-so, the animal translated shape into path. Good rope work began with good posture. The town loosens into fields with a dignity that seems practiced. Wind moves barley like a reader turning a page. You count 100 steps, then look back because you prefer to know what your return would see. The sky burns off a thin veil, not in anger, only in order. The ground goes from clay to a polite crust that holds your weight and then forgets you. Ahead, the plain throws up wind columns, thin dancers of dust that choose a path briefly and then set it down. They're not high. They're the size of a man's stubbornness. You adjust your scarf so it doesn't perform, knotting it with the flat of your fingers, not the tips. When the first column explores your line, you face it square and close your eyes a heartbeat before it greets you. It passes, it leaves a little grit on your lip. Your mouth learns to agree with the day. Dust devils on the inland roads taught simple habits. Turn into them, close the eyes gently, breathe through cloth. Outwaiting weather is a trade skill. A cart crosses your path and offers a quiet puzzle. The driver points his chin toward the right, because the ruts there are truer. Your instinct had pointed left, because the shade is kinder. You weigh hooves against heat and nod to ruts. The cart answers with one relieved creak, as if it had been waiting to be consulted. By mid-morning, the road's handwriting changes from a long cursive into neat block letters. A low wall appears, then another, then a square shade built of woven reed mats. The spice court. It is not loud. It is arranged. Jute sacks lean like thoughtful men. Tray scales quiver and rest. A steward with a palm rib fan moves air the way a good clerk moves time lightly, evenly. Sound, texture, smell. A bronze spoon rings a small rim. Coarse sackcloth rasps your knuckle. The air opens with cumin, fennel, dried orange peel, and a high note of cassia like a remembered holiday. You hitch to the shade's edge, where hooves don't crowd the trays. Bells stay wrapped. The spice court is its own kind of library. A small etiquette knot arrives with the delicacy of cardamom. At the first stall, the seller is measuring with her city weights a walnut, an egg, a loaf, while a visiting trader prefers the river stones stamped last year. Both are correct, which is a kind of disagreement. You put down your own nest seed, seed and a half, seed and a seed, and offer the middle one to bridge the two. The seller tests it between finger and thumb, smiling the smile of someone whose day just became simpler. She tips a thumb of cumin into your paper, presses 3 extra seeds at the end. You press a pinch of salt onto her cloth, and known to say, "Thank you," with your mouth, because the trade already said it. Between towns, tiny travel waits, well-kept and mutually known smooth measures when local standards differed by a thumb or a season. Courtesy saved more time than arguing math. You buy what road work asks for, not what stories ask for. Cumin and salt for meat that might be honest, but dull by late afternoon. Dry ginger for water that sometimes needs an idea. A small cone of jaggery, because the boy at the night pen likes to count while tasting something that feels like a promise. The steward sweeps a clean square where Sachs stood and shakes his fan once. His job is to keep edges tidy. You nod to edges. A small obstacle stirs near your second string. A reed netting remembers being new and bites at the jar it guards, making a sharp, complaining ticky-tick with every step. You set the load down 1 palm's breadth. Wet the net with your sleeve. Rub a thumb of fat along the reed's edge to teach it how to be old, and bind a new crossing with waxed linen. You lift, listen, and hear the kind of silence you had hoped for. You take your line out by the court's quieter side, where a date palm stands with its trunk, lime-washed against insects that respect chalk more than habit. The ground is hard, the shade is honest, and the wind has decided to stop explaining itself. Past noon, the day arranges a ferry where the canal forgets to be shallow. The barge is a rectangle with ambitions, just wide enough for a pair of carts or your line, if your line acts like a very polite cart. The ferryman is a man of few nouns and perfect verbs. He says step, not come on. He says bind, not later. You like him. Sound, texture, smell. A plank thunks into its notch with a confident sound. Rope lays flat against your palm in the bays. The air tastes of wet rope and water with a memory of fish and iron. You set your animals on the planks one by one, weight centered, eyes forward. The ferryman sets the pole, not pushing so much as leaning his day into the current. The barge moves like a thought that has been spoken before. A complication makes itself useful. Another handler boards with his donkey and forgets how ears work when nervous. The animal tests the plank's edge with more faith than sense. You step and show him the barge's middle with your body. You lay a palm on the near ear and fold it forward once, gently, to remind the animal of inside and outside. The donkey folds its argument. The handler smiles like a man newly introduced to luck. On ferries and narrow bridges, people often calmed and oriented animals by briefly folding an ear. Forward ears listen. Touch teaches. On the far bank, the ramp's last plank gives a cheeky little drop. You spare yourself complaint by smiling at it first. The day rewards you by not adding more. The road ahead climbs a little not into hills, just into a sense of view. Tamarisk and young poplar put their shadows in places you can use. Your counting becomes a softer metronome. 100 steps, a look back. 100 steps, a strap test. 100 steps, water for lips, not throat. The animal's breathing writes even lines. Your own agrees. You call a halt beneath a wall that gave up being a wall and became a low bench of brick. You brew not tea, but its idea. Quince peel in cool water that never learns to boil. Sound, texture. Smell. A fly tests your cup's rim and decides it has other work. The brick holds the day's heat like a mild opinion. The air brings you dust and fennel and the shadow of a bird you didn't see. You write 3 ledger lines because writing makes rest truer. Fairy planks sure ears calmed. Spice court waits bridged come in small favor. Winged columns turn into cloth over breath. Parallel columns in traders' books conditions, courtesies, hazards taught routes more than tallies did. They were maps without drawing. A boy appears from the nearest field, offers figs on a palm leaf with the kind of ceremony that isn't about coin. You exchange a date for a fig, call it even, and let both of you be right. He studies the camel-ass lip as it picks a thorn from the skin of a reed mat. You show him the whorl on the neck where scratches mean friendship, not fuss. He learns quickly. Children often do when the lesson is about attention rather than tools. Wind settles toward afternoon. Clay milestones appear more frequently, each lean just enough to look like a nod. A marker stone shows a carved cup and a circle, the sign of a caravan court with water and a pen. Good. You prefer your days to end where roofs know their jobs. Between you and the court, the road throws one last test, the kind that means nothing tomorrow and everything for the next quarter hour. A causeway over a marshy reach has sunk 2 fingers in the middle. The planks on top remember wagons heavy with jars and want to misremember your hooves. You walk it first, empty, counting which boards talk loudest. Then you bring the line over with your own body 4 steps ahead of the lead, so the animals read where your feet trust. You widen where the sound goes hollow. You shorten when the plank sings. It holds. It was a reasonable causeway having a day. Raised tracks brush and plank over mud were patched by whoever needed them next. Travelers reported their condition, like weather, with small language and a pointed chin. The court is a square of tamped earth with a wall that has learned to be cool by being patient. A reed mat awning throws a wide, kind shadow. The gatekeeper counts with his eyes and his shoulders. 1, 2, 3 animals, 3 loads. 1 man who looks more rested than tired. He sets his palm under water and flicks it lightly at the dust near your feet. Welcome, but also, don't make the floor work more than it must. Inside, the rules of every good court assemble themselves. Water moves along the wall. Bowls go down in order. The young drink first. Straps loosen. Back ribs get rubbed. You set your letters in the cool niche. The clerk presses your tag with a mark that smells faintly of ash and olive oil. Promises have moved again. You mend while the air becomes evening. A strap that started to tell a story is taught to be quiet with waxed linen. A crate lip that imagined itself sharp becomes polite under the knife. You warm pitch between your palms and smooth it into a wicker seam whose future just improved. Little work now buys hours you can spend on walking. A woman brings bread and cucumber with mint pressed to the plate's edge. You pay in coin and in tone. She adds a pinch of salt without counting it as generosity. You add a fig because the ledger says figs make sense here. Balance is part arithmetic, part weather. The lamps come on in that clever way wicks that remember how they ended last night, flames that prefer to be a thumb high and no more. A man tunes a 2-string fiddle and then leaves it alone. The tune is made of space and the idea of notes. A frame drum gives one patient heartbeat every 4 of yours and seems pleased with that job. A small obstacle arrives the way birds do lightly, then more of them. A pair of swallows insists on tracing their flight under the awning and finds itself tempted by the trough S reflection. A young handler waves his hands too fast. You show him the slow fan-to passes of the palm near the water. Low, steady. The birds complete their circle outside the roof, which is what they meant to do anyway. He grins. This is how roofs and wings agree. Courts hired stewards for water and ash, but small piece was the tenant's work hands low. Voices lower, lamps trimmed, floors swept before sleep. You write your last lines of the day? Causeway boards counted middle eased. Court read shade wide keeper fair. Letters niche cool tag marked. You press the pomegranate once more and close the book with a soft crackle that means the day will remember itself for you. You lay your sleeping roll with the order that will make morning graceful. Sandals under cloth, not in sight. Knife sheathed, pointing toward where you would go if duty woke you. Cup rinsed and set to dry where your hand will find it without looking. Bells unwrapped now so they can make one syllable when an animal shifts to a better dream. Sound, texture, smell. Reed mats exhale their faint green. The wall at your back keeps the last of the day's warmth, like a secret you allowed to know. The air is water thread cool with a line of lamp smoke you don't mind. You take one slow sip of the quince water that is mostly water now, which is exactly right. Your jaw loosens because the day says so. Your shoulders become heavier in the friendliest way. A moth tests your sleeve and decides the reed lamp has the better conversation. Somewhere outside the wall, a dog barks once and then remembers what night is for. If your eyes are heavy now, that's correct. Let them half close. Let the weight leave your shoulders the way the light leaves the wall, inch by willing inch. Tomorrow's track exists, but it doesn't need you yet. Somewhere beyond this gate, there is another ferry, another court, another clerk with a careful brush, and also this square of shade, this thin channel of water, this cup cooling in your hand. A bell gives one last, satisfied syllable as an animal settles. The court keeps your breath the way a good roof keeps warmth. The road loosens its hand and promises to be exactly where you left it. Sleep, the caravan can wait. The letters are where they should be, and the night knows how to carry the rest.